Welcome back. This is Gary Mitchell, part 3 of our 10-part series exploring Paul's letter to the Romans as a spiritual formation guide. And I emphasize the word exploring. We are exploring this, trying to pick up ideas on how to further our spiritual transformation and what we do living in grace. The third part, or my third section of this, I labeled awareness. And I encourage you to refer to Romans chapter 1, verse 18 through chapter 2, verse 16. So you could read that right now if you want to just pause, 1:18 through 2:16. I also encourage you to just read straight through several times. Just read straight through, just as if, hey, I just got a letter from Dad, and here's what it says. So read it pretty much that way. So maybe you can get lost in all of Paul's examples. Perhaps you like to pull out certain sins to point to other people. That sort of reading severely misses the point. Paul tries to bring emotion into this discussion, which is a preacher's trick, and he was a preacher, amongst other things. The point isn't that other people sin. The point is that sin is everywhere. And everyone deserves to die, that is, be apart from God. The definition of hell for some people is living apart from God. Like I said, I'm not a theologian, so don't bring me up there. So Paul has to deal with the law, capital L. And by that, almost always when he refers to that, he's referring to Jewish law. He was a Pharisee. Pharisees were expert in Jewish law. They knew every one of them, and they knew every one you are missing. Not what they didn't do, but that's humans, right? So anyway, he's talking about Jewish law, not Roman law. And he needs to bring together a group of Jesus followers who come from different cultures. I bet they were actually suspicious of each other when they met together in their little grouping called an ecclesia. I bet they were suspicious of each other when they first began to meet secretly to share their experiences of Jesus. There was a period of time where they could meet fairly openly, but then Nero became emperor and you couldn't meet openly. And most of the life of the Jesus followers were, you had to not really wear your cross on your tunic. So, why does Paul begin this way? We'll never change until we become aware of the need for change. We must become aware of our ignorance before we can begin to study and find a teacher. We must become aware of our physical health before we search out and begin to practice health-building practices such as eating nutritional meals, getting physical activity, and sleeping well. We must become aware of the shortcomings of our relationships and spiritual direction before we search out ways to get in touch with the Spirit. I often bring this back to an early cartoon trick that I learned a long time ago. If you watch Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner cartoons, the coyote never falls when he runs off the edge of a cliff until he becomes aware that he's not standing on solid ground anymore. He is suddenly aware of that, and then he drops, and it gives you the funny look. And that's the comic part of that. For a lot of us, that's not comic. We don't become aware. We just kind of live right along, and we think we're just fine, and something needs to change. There is ancient philosophy that goes back as long as 5,000 years about containers, like a jar or a gourd or something that's going to fill up. And the container is totally worthless until it's empty. And then when it's empty, you can use it. So don't think too far, just go that far. If you become an empty container, you can be filled up. Now, the important thing is, what are you going to fill yourself up with? That's the point that Paul is going to be making about what to fill yourself up with. This awareness and the spiritual direction leads to faith, the next step on the journey. It touches on one of the manifestations of grace that John Wesley taught, that grace is always there. It's here, around us, ready for us to see and infuse into our lives. It's called prevenient grace. Don't argue with me. I've had some evangelicals argue with me and say, well, grace is just grace. Well, yes, it is, but it manifests, it makes itself apparent in different ways. And this is prevenient. This is the grace that goes before. It precedes human response to God. Wesley believed this grace is given to all people universally, enabling them to recognize their need for God and making it possible for them to respond to the gospel. It counteracts the effects of original sin and restores some measure of free will. If you're living in sin, you're not living with free will. You're captured by those emotions and drives and things that drive us away from God. Prevenient grace is there. When we empty ourselves and allow that to come in, then we can now fill ourselves with this grace. So that's this part of Romans that I just wanted to bring out. Read that and then read the whole book again, like I said, and we'll explore the next step on the way. This is a little weird for us, but we'll explore anyway. We get into a Jew and Gentile thing, but that's okay. Stay tuned. We're going to work our way all the way through this whole spiritual formation thing. Thank you for listening and have a blessed day.